Welcome to Strength Chat. It's been a little while since we've had the show going, so we were sitting here trying to think of some funny stories and things, and, well, a lot's happened. And I figured I would just do some bragging instead of funny stories. So, yeah, that's a good way to start out.
There's nothing new about that.
No, I've heard that I like to talk about myself. I don't know. My wife says it. You say it. Well, actually, a lot of people say it. So. But, for those that follow on social media, I'm sure you're aware that I'm chasing the second and final installment of the Grand Goals, which was to be the first person in history to both squat and deadlift 1,000 pounds for reps. I did the first half of that 3 years ago with the assistance of Coach Brandon over here doing all my programming during the course of that, and then the next following 3 years as we've prepped for that.
Does this mean you're going to dump me after you squat?
No.
What will I do?
I will give you.
What will I do?
I will give you fantastic training that you'll be so enthused.
Turkish get-ups and one-arm snatches.
Maybe one-arm snatches. Turkish get-ups, it's too much like cardio.
I think you are going to start running. Don't you want to start making your way back down to the 200s?
Not quite that far. I figure 240 is like a good place to sit if I can get back down there and stay there. So
it might take him a year to run 1,000 meters.
So,
I bet we could convince him to do something like that. We could get.
Are you kidding?
That's less than a mile.
I am well aware.
He's so offended.
Last
It would
round,
take a year to build up to that.
I don't know. Last run I did was for 3 miles.
Are you kidding me?
Last run I did was for 3 miles. It was a few years ago.
You're not very aerodynamic.
You were in
right
high
now.
school, I think.
No, it was just a couple years ago at the beach.
Look how defensive you get.
I know.
No, it's 1,000 meters.
Oh, I don't even. I'm an American. I don't even know what a meter is.
It was admittedly like an 8-minute pace, so it wasn't terribly fantastic. But I ran 3 miles. I probably weighed 250 or something.
Oh, we met your old wrestling coach. That was fun.
Oh yeah.
He told me you got a lot of concussions.
I don't remember.
Banging your head against the mat.
But back to the bragging. I did in training hit the 1,000 pounds at least for a double. Not quite as deep as I would like it to, but I'm still pretty happy. And now we got 6 more weeks, Brandon?
About,
Yeah.
6-7 more weeks.
About 5 training, real training weeks, I think.
So looking forward to that. Anybody that's in the San Diego area, Thursday, March 19th at the Convention Center, 2 p.m., that will be going down. See how many reps I can hit with 1,000 pounds.
Yep.
So, well, today's guest, we have has the honor and distinction of being Strength Chat's very first podcast guest. So, welcome to the show, Jeff Halevy. Welcome
Thanks,
back.
guys. Thanks for having me back.
Welcome back.
So, for those that don't know, Jeff runs he's got a million projects. That's one of the things I love about him. He's just a consequent entrepreneur that's always got a lot of things going. Runs a premier facility in downtown New York, along with many of his other projects. And welcome to the show again. I know so much has happened in the last few years because you're a busy man. Tell us. Let's just start a little bit. You've done some changes with the gym and what you're doing there, and then we'll dive into some other topics.
Yeah. So what's up, guys?
Yeah.
First of all, how are you, Rudy? How are you, Brandon?
Good to see you. Yeah.
Of course. Chris, it's funny hearing you talk about when you talk about talking about yourself. It reminds me of the Norm Macdonald Bob Dole character on Saturday Night Live. So Chris Duffin likes to talk about Chris Duffin.
That's pretty good.
So I've dated myself like crazy, by the way, with that joke, because about half the audience is like, who the hell is Bob Dole? We remember him. Let's not delude ourselves. So a lot's been going on. I closed Halevy Life. Halevy Life is not Halevy Dead, although I'm still alive. And it is now Apex Human Performance. We've completely changed our model, so we're no longer open to the public at all. We are a direct membership referral only. So you need to know a member to become a member. You need a referral directly from them. And we do still physical therapy, nutrition, and the health testing that we do. So like VO2 max, RMR, all of those things are still open to, to the general public. But if you want to become a member here, like I said, you've got to know somebody. That's been kind of weird, turning people away. It just
for an entrepreneur, it just doesn't make sense for an entrepreneur, does it? Right?
Exactly.
What? I'm turning someone away.
For a man who always thought more is better, it doesn't make sense. So it's I didn't even think about that up until now. But it's probably been part of some bigger global changes. And so I've got that going. I'm in the middle of writing a book that I really can't talk about. Because I'm pretty sure I signed some paperwork that prevents me from speaking about it. But it will be out in spring 2021 or thereabouts. And then I also just raised money for a tech company that's operating in stealth. I'm serving as its current CEO. And as you just heard, it's operating in stealth. So guess what? I can't talk about that either.
All right.
Which leaves us one subject, which is Chris's favorite subject, Chris Duffin.
Let's talk about Chris. You want to talk about Chris? Let's talk about Chris.
Chris, you know what I just realized, though? I'm going to be in San Diego, actually, at URSA this year for the first time in my life. So they've asked me to come every single year. Very nice, invitation, and I never went. So I'm actually going to be there when you smash 1,000 pounds for at least 5 reps.
Awesome. That's funny. Did you see my story post then about the 5 reps?
I didn't. I just saw your double, and the way the double looked, I said, "There's no way you're only hitting 3."
So this is a funny story though. So Brandon and I sat down basically March last year and started working on. Okay, it's time to make a run at this, and I told my wife, "Hey, I'm going to go for that 1,000 pounds for a triple next year," and she looks at me and she says, "Yeah, that's not enough." She says, "You need to do 5 reps. I mean, at an absolute minimum, 4 reps, but 3 is definitely not enough." So,
yeah.
So anyway, and I'm like at the time, like, "Fuck, what? Excuse my language."
Let's get to 1, but what? 5?
But 5 reps, and now it's like. Yeah, I think that's still a bit too much, but it's worth shooting for right now. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, anyway, it's just funny. I think it's a good story. So, of course, because it's about me. So, it's obviously a great story. Now, a lot of people may not know your background, which you've been through, some tough times in your life. And you've taken yourself out of that and really you've built a number of great businesses. And one of the things that, conversations that we've had is like your passion for helping people with mental health issues. And so can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. Well, look, I don't know what you're talking about because my life has always been easy street. So you're probably thinking of somebody else.
Yeah, right.
I just managed to, at a lot of points in my life, if you laid out, a few options in front of me, I managed to select the absolutely worst option that I had available. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you this story. I never told this story before. Here's how I almost ended up in prison for 25 years. By Jeff Halevy. Starring Jeff Halevy. Produced by Jeff Halevy and narrated by Jeff Halevy. Don't steal that from me, Chris.
Okay.
So this was the great thinking that I had at the ripe age of 22, while I was busy majoring in English. And actually, that's not true. I was majoring in cocaine and minoring in English. And I hit the point where I wasn't even myself anymore. I had a lot of success in my first real career as a musician, and I fell in with that scene and everything that comes along with it. And before I knew it, I had lost a few years of my life. And, I think back to those days and, I'm honestly happy that I can't remember a lot of it. But when I was 22 years old, I was actually, here's how bizarre it is. I'm visiting my parents, but I'm actually shooting hoops and doing cocaine at a basketball court near them. So I'm not actually with my family. I'm doing, blow and ball, which I guess there's a new sport. So yeah, exactly. So I was not in the best neighborhood really while I was doing this, and a couple of teenagers who were late teens came by, and they started saying stuff to me, and I let them know that it was not a good idea to be saying that to me. I'm giving you the clean version, right?
Yep.
So slightly sanitized version, and I ended up beating a few of them up, the ones who decided they wanted to stick around. And then I took off back to my parents' house. And for whatever reason, one of them followed me, called the cops, and said that I had, in fact, started the fight and beat them up, completely unwarranted. So the next thing I know, I'm back at my parents' house, and I'm sitting out front and I'm smoking a cigarette. And I smoked a god awful number of cigarettes. I was like a pack a day of unfiltered Pall Malls at this age. Toasty lungs. Although I probably could have still outrun you, Chris. So I'm sitting on my parents' porch, and all of a sudden the cops roll up, and I had the instinct that every law-abiding citizen has when they see the police, which is to run. So I took off. Now, even my running strategy was awful because I ran into an enclosed environment. I ran into my parents' house. So instead of running somewhere where I could actually evade them, I cornered myself. So I ran into my parents' house, and once I was in there, my parents had no clue what was going on or what had just happened before this. I thought, well, let me run out the back door. So thinking there's no way the police have covered off that angle.
No, they would never think about that.
Never. So I decide to run out the back door, and there's cops in the yard already. So I turn back around, and I decide that the next best option is to barricade myself inside a bathroom. So I locked myself inside a bathroom at my parents' house, and police knock on the door, knock. Hey, get out of the bathroom. And, I'm like, no, go fuck yourself. And they're like, listen, you got to get out of the bathroom. We want to talk to you. Now, the thing is, if you gave me a few options at this point in time, clearly, the best option of whatever these options would be to threaten the police that I had a gun, because that would make them go away, which I proceeded to do.
That's a brilliant move. Okay. Yeah.
So do we. Come out.
It always works,
Yeah.
So
They're just going to go home.
The amazing part is it kind of worked, at least in my mind, because right after I threatened him, it got real quiet. And, time's going by, and, here I am high on cocaine in this bathroom and thinking, there's a chance that I actually scared them off. And I looked out the bathroom window. I saw there were still cops in the yard. So I was like, they haven't left, but they're also not bothering me anymore. So maybe this whole thing will just go away. And about 10 minutes later, there's not a knock at the door anymore. It's bang, 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 bang. Bergen County SWAT opened the fucking door. And so again, I have options available to me. And out of all the options that I had available to me, which included just opening the door and saying, I'm really sorry, and putting my hands up and doing whatever else, I decided that if I hit them hard like a linebacker, I could go right through them. All I had to do was bust that door open and plow through this unknown number of SWAT team, members out there. So, I kind of I get my psych on. I open the door and I blitz them as hard as I can. And I made it a good 6 inches, I think, before I had, God knows how many SWAT team members. I mean, I just felt crushed, absolutely crushed, smothered. I couldn't move an inch. And then after being arrested, I proceeded to get hit with about 25 years worth of charges, including assaulting a police officer, evading arrest, terroristic threats, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. That one came from using my bicycle as a weapon. I didn't realize it was a deadly weapon, but in my anger at the basketball court, I actually picked up my bike and hit them with my bike. So they got me for like everything. They threw the book at me, and I was really scared. I really thought. I definitely had that moment of I've made a big mistake, and I can tell you this much that. I'll tell you the rest of the story. So I end up in front of a judge, and I get very, very lucky. I got now I get to the good option part. I got an option that very few people ever get in their entire life, and most certainly if they're not white. And I got something called pretrial intervention. And what that means is I wasn't indicted, I wasn't arraigned, was never convicted or anything like that. And I was given the opportunity to have a probation officer for 2 years and be on probation for 2 years, report to that probation officer, have a job, and not use drugs. And this whole thing would just disappear. I obviously successfully completed that, but that we could have been having a whole other conversation if we were having any conversation this time, because I would have likely been just getting out of prison.
So how was that?
You didn't know that.
I did.
You didn't know that about me, Chris.
No. I have not heard that story before, and I wouldn't call that one big mistake. That sounds like a series of big mistakes.
Yeah. Well, I like to take one and then compound it as much as I can.
just see how bad you can make it.
Yeah, I think in our first podcast, you had shared issues with drugs and alcohol, and your escape from that world and moving on. But that's a funny story that you didn't share before. That was a good one.
It's funny now, right? It's one of those things where it's almost like when you're in a near hit, or near miss with a car accident, and you can only laugh about it because you're there to laugh about it.
Yeah.
I'd say that's definitely one of those stories. But, that came at the tail end of some pretty serious mental health stuff. I shouldn't say at the tail end. I would say it was really the piece de resistance for, a few years of pretty heavy depression, being misprescribed medications to treat that depression, and then deciding I'd create my own cocktails, no pun intended, to work my way out of it. And going through that experience, what preceded this was actually a drug-resistant depression. And that was when I was almost 19 years old. I had a lot of trauma as a kid. I know, Chris, I'm sure that's something you're completely unfamiliar with. And so I had a lot of trauma as a kid, and I never dealt with it. I almost lost my life to a tumor that was misdiagnosed for about a year. And by the time they got it, it was the size of a pear. It was beneath my brain, behind my eyes, and above my hard palate. It's called an angiofibroma. And I was a couple of weeks away from losing my vision, being mentally impaired, and ultimately dying. And then I had some other experiences in my childhood, too, that really just left their mark. But I never dealt with that stuff. And I can say that generationally, in my generation, and, Chris, we're in the same generation here. No one really knew any better, so, no one told me that it would be a good idea to maybe talk to a therapist or, really talk to anybody. So I just had this stuff bottled up. I certainly had a lot of rage, tons of anger about, being singled out, in some way by God or the universe or whatever, and having to deal with this. And then, that just it was turned inward, I guess, as they say in psychologists say. And the next thing I knew, I was stapled to a couch for a few months. It was the most bizarre experience I had in my life. I barely got up to even go to the bathroom. I just never got up. I had the same hoodie on the entire time. And then eventually, after, changing different prescriptions, or maybe it was just time, it broke. But I wasn't a different person at all. I was still the same person that got into that mess to begin with. Hadn't dealt with any of the actual issues because I never really did therapy either. I didn't trust people. I didn't want to open up to anybody. I didn't ask for help. I didn't share. And I just had a huge chip on my shoulder. And that, it's funny because it's the same chip that really got me into a mess that fueled the early part of my career. I'd say what really, that the change after going through rehab and all these, the experiences of pulling myself out of it, I ended up, graduating from NYU, cleaned up, so to speak, and landed a pretty good job in corporate financial communications, and then ended up being the youngest executive at a marketing agency. Just a couple of years later, no one knew anything about my past, and I still had the same chip on my shoulder, and it was anger that now sort of was rechanneled into into overcoming, I guess, in some way. And if you buy into Nietzsche or Alfred Adler, and they have this theory of moving from inferiority to superiority or overcoming, and that's Adler. Nietzsche would say overcoming. That's what I was living. I wanted to be invincible, and I wanted to be an outsized version of myself. So, more money, more girls, stronger. That was the time that I fought. I spent years fighting in a ring, doing Muay Thai and Sancho, and like all these. That had its place. It was a strategy that worked for a while, and then it kind of stopped working. And that's when I decided to, not just help myself, but I realized that in a process of helping myself, I could really help others.
So how are you doing that today?
Well, the book that I can't talk about is one of the ways. I really do. I went into, so this is kind of an interesting story. I can tell you the lead up to the book. So, I got a multi-million-dollar business in Manhattan. I had some other, successes too. And, I'm doing all right for myself, but my life just doesn't feel good. And it felt clunky. Like I had all these parts, I had a failed marriage, whatever. Everybody gets a starter marriage. And, right? It's a mulligan.
I hope not.
Some of us have taken two mulligans.
Well, I'm not talking to you, Brandon. I'm
okay, good.
Yeah. He's talking to the other three of us here. So yeah.
But I got friends who have gotten mulligans of mulligans of mulligans, so it's okay. But life had given me some feedback. I'd say that maybe I wasn't living in the best way possible, and being the stubborn ass that I was, I completely ignored life, and I just kept on, forging my way ahead. And that left me feeling with my life was this, these clunky parts that were just duct taped together and really just didn't fit. Like a square wheel or something. It was just awful. Like it was getting the job done. I was getting from A to B, but it took a lot of effort, and it was just messy, and it took, and it was painful, So I took a step back, and I really, for the first time in my life, I was someone who was always very comfortable looking at things with a telescope or a magnifying glass, but never a mirror. And it was the first time in my life that I really took some time for some deep introspection. And it led me to discovering a lot of things, about myself. I'm still on that journey now. I think it's a journey, by the way, that most American men will understand, even if they haven't had the extremes that I've had in my life. I can tell you this. You know what the leading cause of death is for men under 50 in English-speaking countries? U.S., U.K., Canada. Number one cause of death.
Guessing suicide?
You would have guessed correctly, Chris.
Wow.
Suicide.
That's
So,
surprising.
yeah. Well, it really, in a way, it's not surprising. I think in a way, a lot of us know it because we've been touched by it in some way. We've either experienced it personally in our families. Maybe it was us who attempted it. I almost killed myself twice. I think we've all, we've all brushed up against it. So there's a societal awareness that it's out there. But it's uncomfortable to talk about, right? Like if we don't want to hear someone sharing that they're suicidal or that maybe they were suicidal. It's just uncomfortable, fodder. But it's something, and that's part of the stigmatization of mental health, and especially male mental health.
Well, I think
So
I think for men too is the big stigma is weakness, and that's one of the reasons that people won't seek. Well, let alone men having trouble just going to see a doctor, which is another issue in general, let alone seeing a therapist. So, like I even covered that in my book that, I've had to use that as a resource during my lifetime as well. And it's something that, if you need to go there, you need to go there.
Well, it's because, we have these engrams that we're coded with growing up. Things like boys don't cry, nice guys finish last. I would say one of the myths that we all believe in is the hero with no friends. Look, we grew up on Rambo, right? Mm-hmm. Rambo didn't say, I need help.
Ever.
Yeah, Rambo was there, pulling arrows out of his stomach, cauterizing the wound with gunpowder, which we all know is very realistic, by the way. And but we're imprinted as kids, at 5, 10 years old with these example of, Supermen who we then model. And we think it's weak to have feelings, to express pain, and to ask for help. And that's when we get trapped in something that researchers actually at Harvard have labeled the man box. It's this box that we put ourselves inside that prevents us from getting help from others. It entails us completely secluding our feelings. And there's one way out of the box that most men know, and it's the business end of a firearm usually.
Yep,
That's got to change.
That's the unfortunate truth. So.
Sorry, I know none of this is about deadlifting or benching or anything like that, but
No, but
this might be a more important message.
I have in my time in the fitness community, particularly, I've seen quite a bit of that, or have because of my openness about some of my struggles. There's a lot of people that have come to me, with stories of their own struggles in that manner. A surprising number of people that you would think have it all, and it's surprising how prevalent and how many people have issues related to this.
Now, fitness is a weird place too because it's everything that you just described in that kind of hero mindset and the self-seclusion. We talked about on a few podcasts ago. I mean, the huge marketing campaign that Animal had 10 years ago was like hardcore seclusion, like let your relationships die, be this lone wolf. It's all about
hood up, head down.
Yeah, like ratty apartment, just eating the food that is necessary for fuel. And we're starting to come out of that. I think a lot of that is some of the openness of leaders in the industry, of Chris and you and different people, and I'm sure many other reasons. But fitness seems to be a place where a lot of people go to that. Or I wouldn't even say go to that. I would say there's... in my experience in working with a lot of very talented and strong individuals, there's a lot more under the surface that is not presented socially. There's a lot more that is quite contrary to what their appearance might be across social media.
And that, part of the reason I think is why, what type of people are drawn to this industry. people, just like Jeff's opening story, wanting to overcome these struggles and, issues in his life. And what did you do? You want to be out there and you want to be performing in the business world, in the gym fighting, it's that opportunity to show how strong you are and that I don't need help. And I think, not saying everyone,
absolutely.
but definitely I think that there's possibly a higher prevalence within the industry because that you've got that outlet.
Yeah, look, and I mean, it's not even just, I think fitness for sure, but the way that we even are, have a lot of these fitness personalities on our radar these days is obviously Instagram. And behind every great Instagram account, and I'm not suggesting it's yours, but I'd say behind nearly every great Instagram account is greater hurt, greater depression, greater suffering. Instagram is a great platform for presenting life the way you want others to perceive it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
is what it is.
Yeah, and there's it's such a vacuum in like this one very I recently didn't have a phone for a week, and that was the first time I hadn't had a phone for I don't know, since I was 16 probably, and it just felt kind of weird, because it having my phone and opening it up and habitually hitting that Instagram tile, was no longer present, and I don't know, it was just a weird thing. It made me realize how interconnected that was to everyday life. It was no longer just like a social platform or a place you went to talk to your friends. It was very much an integral part of your life, whether you liked it or didn't, and in whatever role that plays. I don't think many people know right now. Not that it's all bad. I mean, I think especially we're here because of social media, and that's how our business survives.
It's kind of a side note, but yeah, I there's a lot of negatives that come with it, but by far, I think the positives significantly outweigh. Mm-hmm. It's the ability to do what we're doing. We're recording this podcast. We're going to get it out to a bunch of people. It's another way for us to reach people around the world with the messages that we want to share, the education that we want to share, and I think that far outweighs the rest of it. We just can't ignore that.
Absolutely. Look, it's we're evolving right now as we speak in the way that we interact with the internet and social networks. So, I don't want to sound like I'm making a damning statement about the internet and social media networks forever by any stretch of the imagination. I'm saying right now, I think we're going through a transitional period where eventually we'll all understand that they have their place. But for a lot of people, it really is, especially the younger generation, it's creating a lot of suffering. What I wanted to touch on too is, you said that the fitness industry tends to attract a lot of these folks who want to overcome in some way. And it makes a lot of sense. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. It all starts from the same place. We don't feel like we're enough in some way. That's it. And the second that we're able to just say that and get the support that we need, get the nurturing that we need, the whole world's, and this sounds melodramatic, but the whole world changes. That's the initial hurt, that all of us have. Now, some of us can take that hurt and we can perform the alchemy that's required to really change it into something different, to change it into fuel for something positive. I would argue, I'm a few weeks away from 41 right now, and I would say that I have a very different view of all of this, at this stage of my life. And I realize I could have accomplished all of the same things and more if I hadn't used anger as my fuel. Because all of the talent, all of the other things were still there. So you could have had this cleaner fuel to run on. Yeah. And, the green fuel is love. The fossil fuel is fear. And fear manifests itself in anger, if you will.
Unfortunately, introspection is not necessarily a skill that is easily taught or really presented throughout basically any of our, education as we're growing up, and it's one of those really powerful things. That's why I focus so much on that in The Eagle and the Dragon, is really driving home what introspection can do for your life if you really take the time to understand your whys, your values, like all these sorts of things. But it takes some serious time. It's not just sitting back and thinking about your day.
I think
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead, Rudy.
Yeah, I think it's important, at least in this podcast and sharing with you, Jeff, to look somewhat retrospectively. 20 years ago, as a real estate developer, I purchased the Oregon State Mental Hospital for redevelopment. And part of that requirement was to provide housing for people with mental illnesses in the community that we were going to develop. And what I needed to find out was more about mental health, because people then, as now, just don't understand it very well. It's important to understand that if you have some mental health issues, that you're not alone, that at least 1 out of 20 people has some sort of mental health that was derived from childhood. But if you add drug and alcohol as a problem and categorize that as mental health, it's like 20%. So 1 out of 5 people in America are suffering from some form of mental health. So you're not alone, and you shouldn't feel like you're an outcast as a result. There's help out there, and people need to learn how to accept it, and to be somewhat. I mean, you have to be introspective to be able to deal with it. You have to be retrospective to understand that it's out there, it's prevalent, and it's not something that you have to be ashamed about. It's something you just have to learn how to deal with and how to ask for help. So I think that's where you finally came from too, as well.
Yeah, the problem is too that a lot of this gets masked. So we're not really talking about it. But then on top of it, how many deaths do you think there are a year from alcohol in the United States?
Yeah, a zillion.
Okay, so 88,000 is the number. How many gun deaths do you think there are every single year?
Yeah, it's more than that, isn't it?
Nope, 33,000.
Oh, really?
33,000. Okay? Yeah. Okay. So we can already start to find the numbers a little interesting, maybe. Now, let's get to I'll give you a kicker. Okay. Of those 33,000 gun deaths, how many do you think are suicide?
A quarter of them?
23,000. 2/3.
So most of them, yeah.
That's a problem. That's a problem. Rudy, you're a businessman. You know how to look at a spreadsheet and let now the thing is, when you look at your financial statements, let's say you're looking and you realize you've got some negative cash flow that you're going to be incurring in your projection. First step is saying there's going to be some negative cash flow. What can we do about it? Acknowledging that the problem exists, and then there's a lot that can be done. I feel that the conversation is trending in the right direction now, probably for the first time ever. But I do still feel that men, we sort of lag behind in this conversation. And there are reasons for it. Even the idea of men are, whether it's by nature or nurture, we isolate ourselves. Men, generally speaking, are lone wolves. However, when it comes to sports, tribalism, military, all of a sudden we turn into a wolf pack when we actually need to be part of something bigger. But otherwise, then what happens? Then we all go our separate ways. I'm trying to think. There's a movie where it's like, I think it's Sylvester Stallone, the Russian dude from Rocky, and a bunch of the other, was it the Expendables or something like? The point is that
Expendables, yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought it was. So all these guys come together, they do some kind of really tough mission, and then what happens? They all go back on their separate ways and live their solitary lives, once again. That's unfortunately
until Expendables 2.
Yeah, exactly. Until Slide decides it's time to make the cash register ring again.
Right.
But you get the idea. So I think that, that we are evolving, that there is a greater voice for this right now, but also at the same time that something really does need to be done for men, because this stuff comes out sideways no matter what. The things that we're talking about, they come out. So think about it this way. If a man is suffering and is full of fear, and I'm not trying to make men victims by any stretch of the imagination here before anyone gets their feathers ruffled over this. The point is, I'm trying to arrive at a way of looking at this that's for everybody's good. If a man is suffering, he has the option of killing himself. If he does not avail himself of that option, this is going to come out sideways in another way. And there's a term that's being floated around right now, and that term is toxic masculinity. Toxic masculinity is another way of acknowledging that the man box exists. And for those men, especially at the extremes, who don't deal with their hurt, with their fear, and with their anger, that this can somehow come out sideways, that then, of course, adversely affects women and other people in their lives.
Yeah, I think that's pretty easy to see in our society.
It's
suicide is, you look at it's a long-term solution to a short-term problem. There's a way to figure this out without ending it.
Well, there's a way to figure out without ending it, and also without becoming toxically male, which I don't really believe in that term, necessarily. I understand what people who use that term are trying to, to suggest by using it, because it does take this massive amorphous thing that we kind of all know exists in some way, shape, or form, and slaps a pretty nasty label on it in the interest of, of classifying it without any level of, elegance or refinement that an issue like this really deserves. But it's nice because it also then gives other people something to get really angry and riled up about, which, always feels really nice. That's the thing, is people think that anger is not an emotion that feels nice to us. The truth is, we love to be angry. And the reason we love to be angry is it's because it's the ego's illusion of restoring control. We learn this when we're kids, Look, when a kid gets angry, it's because stuff's just not the way they want it to be. And there's a part of us that realizes that stuff is just not the way we want it to be. And then anger, man, does it feel good to get it out there and make us feel, now that we're externalizing this thing, we've taken our internal state and externalized it, that we now somehow have a say again. We now somehow have, some type of, of control. That's a huge digression, isn't it?
It all ties together, so.
I guess.
No one's listening to it. Just say it louder and meaner.
Exactly.
Well, we're going to be bumping against time pretty soon, so I just want to make sure we're aware of that, because I'd like to wrap up in the next 10 minutes.
Well, it sounds like this is something that you've become probably very passionate about within the last handful of years, as you maybe enter new stages of life and have found a ton of success that many people coming from your past certainly wouldn't have. And it seems like you're really motivated to pass some of those lessons along. It's I find myself more as I think I said this in the last podcast that we had, because it was so interesting just to sit back and listen to. And Jeff, you and I have been working together on and off for quite a while, and it's really interesting to me as someone who is there in some low level of support to you to hear a lot of these things. I know you said you can't say a lot about the book right now, but I assume that some of this leads into what that book might be about. Maybe blink twice if that's true or not. You don't have to say anything.
Brandon, you are a wise man.
That's why they call me the wizard.
Yeah. The funny thing is, Brandon, because look, we have these types of conversations, and Brandon doesn't know me like this at all. Brandon knows me, as someone who's out of position on every first rep of his deadlift. So,
yeah, I forgot the history that you worked with Brandon for a while on the coaching side. Yeah,
we're working again now.
Mm-hmm. Oh, excellent.
Yep. because I still haven't hit my 700-pound deadlift.
It's coming.
You know, for variety, maybe, you know, for life keeps on getting in the way.
It has a funny way of doing that.
It does. But you know, I've gotten close a few times, and every time I start getting close, I manage to completely screw it up, or you know, I have you know, something happen in my life. But Brandon's getting me, you know, back on track now. But he's probably just as frustrated as I am because you know, Chris, you're an expert here too. Every single time, first rep lately is just total trash. You know, you can add another 50, 60 pounds to the bar, and then I fix it by the next rep somehow. But Brandon's helping me out quite a bit. We're making progress.
Hey, fix that problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So look, thanks again for you know, for having me. Really do appreciate it. Chris, I will see you in San Diego.
Awesome. I was
you'll
really,
see
I was
all
really,
of us
in
there.
March.
Yeah.
I was really excited when I heard that. So yeah, that'll be fantastic.
Yeah, we'll have a lot of people.
I will
there.
be the loudest. I'll be the loudest voice. That I promise.
Yeah.
Oh, we're going to put you to use spotting.
We
by the
actually
way.
need one more
we need
person
one
to
more
spot.
spotter. So yeah, you better.
I'll do it. I'm in.
Oh, good. Because I don't want to be that one.
It was either you or Rudy.
No, I don't want to do it.
I honestly, I'd be honored. I really would. That would mean a lot to me. That's incredible.
I'm over on the side on my knees praying.
You know what? That's a different kind of spotter.
That's right.
My wife will be looking the other direction. Yeah.
We talked about that. Yeah.
Hey, she better be looking right at you if she asks for at least 5 reps.
And that she won't be.
She better see every single one.
She will watch it in video after the fact. So
It is. I got to tell you, just as someone who's lifted for, you know, such a large part of his life, it is still something that I cannot wrap my head around. You know, the notion of even having a thing. So everybody listening to this, and like people on Instagram, and you know, sort of, you know, a lot of the amateur lifters out there, just don't even know. Here's my suggestion, and please don't sue me if you do this and it doesn't go the way you want. Next time you're in the gym, assuming that you're an average strength, you know, sort of middle of the road power lifter, you could probably squat around, let's say 400 or 500 pounds, maybe 6. Go ahead and load 700, 800 pounds on the bar and just try to stand with it and get it out of the rack. Just unrack it. Nothing else. It is just completely mind-bending to me to think that not only do you have that 1,000 pounds on your back, and I know what it feels like to take some of those heavier weights out and walk them out, which, I mean, I was shaking like a leaf and I wasn't anywhere near 1,000 pounds. But to do that, not just for a single and know you're done, but, you know, to do that for at least 5 reps is just something
Yeah.
that is as much mind as it is body. And I suggest to anybody who doesn't believe it to go ahead and just try and see what it, you know, 700 pounds even feels like on your back if you can get it out of the rack.
Yeah.
Yeah, more than
We
2 reps.
were talking about that the other day. Chris was just saying how what people don't get is how hard it is to maintain the bracing through that kind of a movement for
the
multiple
reps. The reps is
the
what
reps
makes
is
it,
just
yeah.
crazy. I mean, it's
Big difference
one,
between a single and like
Oh,
3 reps.
100%.
3 reps
Yeah.
takes 30 seconds.
yep.
Just of the squatting, not even the standing and, you know, before and after. But back to you, Jeff. Yes, I am saying that.
What?
Where-
you had
where-
a chance to talk more about Chris, and he flipped it?
Where can people follow you, find you, all those sorts of things?
Yeah, I mean, if you're interested in hearing, because I've lost so many followers on Instagram because I no longer post fitness content. So if you'd like to hear my musings and ramblings about life and maybe some of my experiences, the only social media platform I'm active on anymore at all is Instagram. It's jeff.halevy, jeff.halevy. I don't post often, but I do stories frequently. It's like the one final thing that I'm willing to do just to keep the manager, the agent, the lit agent, and everybody happy. So I show that I'm doing something. I hope they don't see this. So that's really the only place to find me. If you want to work with me on your business or anything else like that, or come have me speak, or I don't know, you can go to. I don't even know what I do anymore, so it's hard for me to really. It's hard for me to hawk anything. But my website's jeffhalevy.com. If you'd like to check that out, please. And anybody out there who's had experiences similar to mine, or might be going through something right now that they're having trouble with. I am not a licensed mental health professional, and I'm probably the last person on earth in many ways to give you any advice, but I am more than willing to talk and listen. So if you're listening to this podcast and you're going through a tough time, you know how to find me, so please do reach out.
All right. Well, I really
Very gracious
appreciate
of you. Yeah.
really appreciate having you on, and you sharing the message that you had today and all the openness around that discussion as well, because it's not an easy thing to do, and I appreciate it, and I'm sure this is going to help some people.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, likewise.
Good to see you, Jeff. Thanks for being here today.
Same here.
We'll see you in San Diego.
Yep. See you in San Diego,
Absolutely.
buddy.
You got it.